prayer. Lord, thanks for this day. Pray you'll bless our time together today and pray that you will help us avoid any further tech glitches today. In Jesus' name, amen. So just an explanation why we're a little bit late today. We're going to be late as usual anyway, but then there was something with the video feed wasn't getting through from my computer and everything was acting very strange and we had to do some people had to get down on the floor and find some things. So that's, it wasn't going to be me because I wouldn't be back up yet. So so here we go. Now I got to find excuse me. As we moved the podium around, my drink got moved all the way to the front. So today we're going to talk about extreme risk. I did not do a midweek update this past week, by the way. I was kind of busy. I don't know if I'll do one this week. I have at least 4 interviews that I'm doing. I'm also doing a little prophecy seminar at another church locally. I'm not going to announce that because they have limited space, so I don't want too many people to show up for that. So just pray that goes well. Some people not really that familiar with Bible prophecy, some very familiar with it, so we're just trying to give them a little prophecy 101 to think through. And this is a grid that I use: acceleration, convergence, logistics, understanding. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about, there's just a tremendous amount of things going on. I mean, as I kind of look at everything as it's going, I mean, we're really going down sort of warp speed in this tunnel. And I'm going to talk about extreme risk, mainly in the area of AI. So I'm going to do some stuff on AI, some stuff on politics, because I think they're very interrelated. I think they're very end times related. Again, I'll refer you to Revelation 13 and the mark of the beast technology and how that's coming about. But this whole rise of things like technocracy, artificial intelligence, the growth of that, the risk, the extreme risk, you'll hear one video clip today talk about that are associated with this. And then some of the things that it's being used in that are very, very concerning. So I'll talk about that. And somebody remind me to talk about the finance part of artificial intelligence if I don't remember before I move on. So this is the verse we use each week. As we get closer to the end, there's going to be more understanding about how things are going to happen. I think this is going to be a very big month. We have the UN meeting. It's also the time of what we call the fall feast, whether that's a correct term or not, the later in the year feast of Israel. Now, I just did what I'm not supposed to do. Feast of Israel, the feast of the Lord. They were given to Israel, but they tell us about the Lord. They tell us about the Lord's ministry. They're prophetic, and they're going to be fulfilled. The ones earlier, Passover, first fruits, unleavened bread, and Pentecost were fulfilled at Jesus' first coming. The others, trumpets, Day of Atonement, are going to, and Yom Kippur are going to all be fulfilled at the other. It's also a month of, so there's a lot of things going on. We've got the UN meetings, but it's also a month of anniversaries. And they're like significant date anniversaries. So this will be, Yom Kippur will be the 50th anniversary of the Six-Day War from 1973. That was when Israel, not the Six-Day War, I'm sorry, the Yom Kippur War, which was a war of surprise. And if the United States, I think, had not intervened, Richard Nixon, I think, went against some of his advisors and said, we're going to resupply Israel with arms so they can do that. And he remembered that his mother had talked about how important Israel was going to be. And because of that, he decided, I need to help Israel. And I don't think that was very popular among some of his advisors, but he went ahead and did it anyway. That's 50 years since the Yom Kippur War in 1973. It's also going to be the 30th anniversary in just 3 days on September 13th, the 30-year anniversary of the Oslo Accords that were signed on the White House lawn with Bill Clinton, Yasser Arafat, Yitzhak Rabin, and Mahmoud Abbas was there. And you'll see some of the things, I'll show you a clip of some things that Mahmoud Abbas said recently in a speech that are, well, they're shocking, but they shouldn't be shocking because this is the way the guy has always been. And you'll see a little bit about that. So we'll talk sort of about politics. I'll throw some things in. I don't have near the slides ready that I wanted to have ready just because there's just a pile of things. And I try to do an unpacking of the negotiations and a little bit of greater detail of the negotiations going on between the U.S., Israel, Saudi Arabia, and it involves the Palestinian Authority, but not the state of Palestine. So we'll talk about that. But this is a time where a lot of questions are being asked by people. So I've seen all kinds of videos. The rapture is going to happen by September 23rd or 24th or 25th. It's going to happen on the Feast of Trumpets. No, it's not. This isn't the real Feast of Trumpets. The real Feast of Trumpets should be in December. And so everybody's got these predictions. A lot of people are saying that the things that are going on in New York for the UN General Assembly, starting, I think, later this week or early next week, they will, that could be the covenant of the many that a lot of people talk about. I personally don't think that. I'm going to make a suggestion to you of something that is just some thoughts that are going through my head with regard to this thing with Saudi Arabia and that type of thing. We'll talk about that in just a moment. So it's going to be a interesting week. And again, this is sort of my view. This is just the four horsemen of Revelation and how they're going to, when they start writing, and some people, I get emails, they've already writing, John, they've been writing for 100 years. They've been writing for 5 years. They've been writing for 7 years. And it's interesting. Listen, I get a lot of emails. I get a lot of mails. I get a lot of people, sometimes they write to me and say, if you just knew what I know, you would understand everything. And usually it's something a little bit different than anybody else has. And I don't believe that the Lord works that way. I believe the Lord works through at least 2 or 3 witnesses. And if you're out there and you're the only one spouting something, then you need to instruct somebody else and see if they see the same thing. But I just think if you're just kind of a one-off, a lone wolf, I just think that that's kind of a dangerous place to be in. But these things are going to increase over time. They're going to, whenever they start, or if they've started, they're going to be an increase. So, for example, the first horse says he goes forth conquering and to conquer. Well, what does that mean? Well, he goes forth conquering and to walk and to conquer. That's a process. It doesn't mean that he goes forth and he conquers. It's a process that happens over time. And I believe that it's going to increase. It will reach a peak at some point in this last period of human history. Same way with the red horse, black horse, and pale horse. Their effects aren't felt immediately. So some people believe before the abomination of desolation takes place that the fourth horse, the pale horse, it says he's given power over 1/4 of the earth to kill with the sword. So a lot of people say, well, that means in the first period before the abomination of desolation, 1/4 of the earth is going to be beheaded. Now, this is where some of the other things that I talk about is the logistics. So 1/4 of the world right now would be 2 billion people. And people are saying that that's going to happen in a year and a half. And how many people does that, somebody can do the math. What's 2 billion divided by 500? That's a lot of people being beheaded every day. And then there'll be people that say that, well, it's going to be Orthodox Jews that are beheading people, or that because they've put in place certain things, and the Talmud says, if you violate their rules, you're going to be beheaded. But I don't know, and so I would just ask the question, how many people have been beheaded by Orthodox Jews in the last 20 centuries? I would be surprised if you could put them on one hand, the number. But now we know there is one religion in the world that beheads people. at a pretty alarming rate at times. We also know that leftist progressives and the Jacobins in France in the French Revolution period, over several decades, they beheaded 300,000 people. So you sort of have a little bit of like, okay, well, maybe these are the people we should be worried about because they actually do it. But then there's the logistics part. It's like, how many can they do in a day? This would be an industrial scale, way beyond industrial scale stuff. So I'm just suggesting that maybe it doesn't mean 1/4 of the world is beheaded. And I don't think that's what the scripture says. It's given power. That's the scope of the authority is 1/4 of the earth. Now, does that mean 1/4 of the population? Or does it mean 1/4 of the mass? The land mass of the earth is about 25% of the earth. So he's given control over all of the land mass, or is it 1/4 of the number of people on the planet? So as you see, it gets very complicated. And as I said, I get a lot of emails, I get books, I get charts, graphs, and that type of thing. And I can say to you without reservation, I believe that the people sending me this stuff are brothers and sisters in the Lord. And they're trying to figure it out. They love the Lord. They want to figure it out. They love the prophetic scriptures, and that's great. But I can also say without reservation is that aside from a few big markers, there's not a lot of agreement. So I think that this passage in Daniel is going to mean something that we're going to understand. And now I've spent about 10 minutes talking about something I didn't plan on talking about. So, and I need to, give me 1 second here, because I thought I had copied these and moved them. Not sure what happened here. Okay. Well, I have to move these to the back of my presentation, although it looks like I might have already done that. Is doing so well till I actually look things. So let's look at a few things. So one of the things that is of concern is what's going to happen with the economy. So here's an article from the Wall Street Journal the other day, I think Friday. In-person shopping keeps getting worse. And so what's happening is because of theft and shrinkage. Now, I had somebody at a conference come up to me and say they work for a big clothing chain, and I think the numbers I got, I may have a bad recollection, were somewhere around the shrinkage in a very large state in the United States were somewhere around 30 to 40%. That means the inventory that they put out, 30 to 40% of it never got paid. That's probably not a good business model that's going to work for a long time. I was also told that in Texas, however, the shrinkage rate has grown from like 6 or 7% to 9% in just the last year and a half in this one chain. And that's shocking. I mean, that's 10% of everything that goes on the shelves, walks out the door, and never gets paid for. So what are stores doing? Is the stores are locking things up. And if this doesn't work, they close down. So there's a guy that does these videos walking around San Francisco and Oakland, like down the major commercial streets, like Market Street in San Francisco, and he just did one this week on Oakland. And on Market Street in San Francisco, a video that was done about a month ago, from the Embarcadero all the way down to the convention center, it looked like 95% of the storefronts along the street, at least 95% of them were empty and for lease signs. Now, that's not a good business model. That's going to cause, when that destruction gets priced into the market by banks, having to redo loans and that type of thing. And because of the Charlie Vector thing that happened a few years ago, they have not had to do that. They've been kicking the can down the road. And eventually, they're going to have to price that into the market. And just, drive around anywhere. There's construction going on a lot of places. There's a lot of construction around here because we've got this big Intel plant and other tech things opening up. And we also have a good growth industry called state government here in Columbus. But I drove around some very affluent, upscale commercial developments in Dallas, and I saw 6, 7, 8-story buildings completely empty. And these in Dallas, by no means, the economy in Texas is great. But things have changed, but nobody's priced that. I can tell you, I did a lot of commercial real estate litigation, a lot of high-end commercial foreclosures in the last 15 years of my career. I'm telling you, the banks have pulled everything out of the foreclosure market for the most part. Residential foreclosure, they'll go after you guys. But the big commercial things, because they involve so many dollars, they have not, on my observation, priced the demand destruction into the market. And when that happens, the economy could crater. We're seeing some of that happening right now in China. If you remember years ago with 60 Minutes and others, and I played clips of things in here about the ghost cities of China. I saw a recent video that some guys did on motorcycles driving around China. And mile after mile after mile, they're driving by these big cities built for 2-3 million people that are completely empty. There was one city where they had 16 or 18, like 40, 50-story or taller towers for apartments. They just blew them up, demolished them. And so now we have two of the biggest real estate companies in China are in bankruptcy or on the verge of bankruptcy. The Chinese economy is slowing down. And part of the thing that's happening in China too is, I've talked about this over and over, and I see more and more people talking about it now. I think the first time I talked about it at a conference was 4 years ago up in Lima with Mike Spalding, was the collapsing demographics. China's not coming back. Russia has collapsing demographics. Ukraine's worse than any country in the world, and so is Iran. My personal opinion is that makes them more dangerous, because China has this vision of itself as this great middle kingdom that's going to rule everything. And Xi is totally bought into that vision. And so they have this theory called unrestricted warfare. And look, let's say they go from 1.4 million to 700 million. That's still 700 million people. They could still field a pretty big army if you want an army full of old guys. 50-year-olds. It's just not something that's talked about a lot. And now the demographics are hitting the United States, in part because we had tremendous number of abortions over the years. It's really only immigration that's kind of kept our population growth going. And that's not working out well, because people are brought in that don't really share our values, and that's undermining our culture. What's going to happen? A big article in the New York. I'm like 15 minutes into this thing, and I've got through 2 or 3 slides. Big article in the New York Times this week. This is a political issue. So the Supreme Court said Roe versus Wade was wrong, Casey versus Planned Parenthood was wrong, and the states can decide on abortion. So what have you seen in the press? Oh, those bad Republicans, they're shutting down abortion, nobody's getting an abortion. What did the New York Times report the other day? Huge article, front page. More abortions done since the Supreme Court made that ruling than in the year before. Even though a lot of states have restricted it, and the restrictions have been upheld in many cases. Why? Now you can get an abortion pill online, have it delivered to your house, like Amazon. And so that's become very prevalent. But it's going to be a huge issue this fall or next fall if there's an election. I'm not convinced that there is. In our culture, we're doing absolutely insane things. So California just enacted a new bill, and I'm going to show you a clip now that you'll see the bill on the right. And the bill says you are not allowed as a parent to question, do anything other than affirm your child's choice on gender. This is California. And they always say, well, you Republicans, you're so restrictive. You want to shut everything down. And then what do? They turn around and do this insane thing. Yeah, parents, you're not allowed to raise your kid. And there's fights all over in school boards about whether the school board is going to have to tell the parents that they're having the child change clothes at school and identify as another sex or no sex or whatever. Even though, by the way, they always file their statistics, they have male or female. They don't have it. They always count males or females, but they don't. It's insane. So here's the state legislature who sponsored this in California, this gender affirming bill. Here's what she has to say.
Note that parents affirm their children. They have since the dawn of time. Typically, it happens when their gender identity expression matches their biological gender. But what happens is when it doesn't, that's when the affirmation starts to wane, and that's what we're dealing with here. Although it's called the TGI bill, they're not mentioned anywhere in the law. What's mentioned in the law is the child's gender identity and expression and the parent's affirmation of that, whatever it is, because that is our duty as parents to affirm our children.
Okay. Boy, I've got some, my parents have passed on, but if that's the rule, then I've got some things that I want to go back and talk to them about someday. Parents affirm their children. Our duty as parents is to affirm our children. Do you understand what's going on here? Is a complete undermining of the family. A famous or infamous presidential candidate once said, it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to destroy the family and the parent-child relationship, which is really foundational under Christianity to everything. So here's the bill, California bill, Assembly Bill number 957. It's passed the House and Senate, and it's going to, the guy who seems to be on his way back from filming a hair gel commercial, Gavin Newsom, it's going to, probably a good thing that he's going to, or a good idea that he's going to do this. So, a huge earthquake in Morocco, a couple thousand killed. Before that, I'll say this about Prigozhin. There's a huge mess going on about trying to get control of his assets, his empire, his streams of income. He was probably worth over $1 billion as he siphoned off things. So here's some pictures on the right-hand side. You know, you see like these are the police presence at his funeral in the upper right-hand corner. And then below that, you see some things in Niger where the Wagner Group is providing security for the people who did the coup there. On the right is the Central African Republic. And he controlled buildings, and he had his guys were pretty brutal fighters. So that's, and then we have this earthquake in Morocco. Right now, estimates are more than 2,000 dead. It was about a 6.8, but it's, sometimes it's not how high that number is, but how strong the earthquake is and how long it lasts. The epicenter here was south of Marrakesh. A lot of damage in Marrakesh. You can see the damages, people being pulled out of buildings, and just tremendous amount of destruction, and over 2,000 people dead. So this was a bit of an earthquake, though. In the Fifth Circuit Friday, they came out with the decision. So let's recap what happened. In Louisiana, a lawsuit was filed by social media users and a couple of states' attorney generals, I think Missouri and Louisiana. And they sued Biden, Fauci, HHS, Health and Human Services, the CDC, and some other organizations, FBI, the State Department, because they were meeting with social media people to control what people were able to say in public. That's clear violation of the First Amendment of the Constitution. But when you talk to these people on the left, it's like, oh, no. Disinformation is not, what we determine to be disinformation or misinformation or malinformation, that's not free speech. You're not allowed to say that. And so now you see all these things with hate speech. You see these people that protest outside of abortion clinics who are being tried for denying right of access when they're just standing along the street praying. There were 5 or 6 of them just convicted, and they all face 11 years, a minimum of 11 years in prison. Think about that. An America with a K, I believe, is what you mean to say. This is shocking. The speed with which it's happened. As I said in my talk at Texas, it happened gradually, then suddenly. Like, where did that come from? And all of a sudden it's here, and it's a problem. But the Fifth Circuit did do sort of a little bit of things. So the judge in Louisiana, they asked for a temporary restraining order and a preliminary injunction, which was granted by the judge. It says the federal government, you're not allowed to interfere. Your agencies are not allowed to interfere with the tech platforms. And the tech platforms went along with it, but you could see there were statements made by Jen Psaki, remember that? Jen Psaki. He's now making a couple million a year probably at MSNBC, spouting off her views. But, they made these things like, look, tech companies, you have this great provision called Section 230 that gives you some immunity. If you don't go along with what we want and block people and shadow ban people, and I know we're shadow banned a lot of times, we'll overturn Section 230. And if you really give us a lot of grief, remember what we did with the Christians and Lois Lerner and the IRS on tax-exempt organizations? We know how to make your life miserable. And you see, like, this guy who got arrested in front of his family, it was a SWAT team came out to get him for praying outside an abortion clinic. By the way, when he went to trial, he was found not guilty in like 20 minutes. And having been a trial lawyer for a long time and sitting with a jury, having to sit in the courtroom while the jury's deliberating because they always have questions. They always have questions that's like, we all worked on this case for years. Why are you asking that question? Because that's not one we thought of. Well, this guy was found not guilty in 20 minutes. That's unheard of. I mean, they can't even really figure out, where's the bathroom and what's the order we go to the bathroom in the jury room in 20 minutes. Now, some have been convicted. People are getting these crazy things. So in Louisiana, the judge gave a very broad injunction. Now, what the Fifth Circuit did was they reversed it a little bit. It says, a group of social media users in 2 states alleged that numerous federal officials coerced social media platforms into censoring certain social media content in violation of the First Amendment. And so this is a great, this is why it's a 77-page opinion, because it says, we agree, but only as to some of those officials, so we affirm in part, reverse in part, vacate the injunction in part, and modify the injunction in part. And so what they did was they kept it in place with regarding the executive office of the president, the White House press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, counsel to the president, White House Partnerships Manager, Special Assistant to the President, Administrator of the United States Digital Service, and then the CDC, the National Climate Advisor, and I think the FBI is also included there on the right-hand side. So those people are still enjoined. Now the question is, do you really think they're going to change? Really? I mean, come on. They're not going to change. They don't believe in the Constitution anymore. You're going to see a concerted effort to keep President Trump, former President Trump, off the ballot. There have been Republican-funded research papers put out there by rhino Republicans, I guess I would call them, that say that the 14th Amendment and the insurrection clause in that prohibits President Trump from running for office, even though I don't think he's really being tried anywhere for insurrection, and he's certainly not been convicted of it, but they're just saying Lawrence Tribe, it's amazing how stupid, I guess, well-educated people can be, unwise. He's running around saying, oh, it's self-executing. Secretaries of State can decide whether they want Trump on the ballot or not. They don't even have to take it to court or anything. And the amendment doesn't apply. It applied to a certain small group of people coming out of the Civil War. But it is going to be used in a couple of cases. And they'll target a couple of states where former President Trump might win. And now they have all these things going on that came out. It came out yesterday that the state of Georgia, they wanted to indict 20 additional people or 22 additional people. Lindsey Graham and this person and this lawyer and that lawyer and everything, for the same thing that have been done by Democrats in at least 4 or 5 recent elections, challenging the election results. They've completely misrepresented what President Trump supposedly said in the phone call with the Secretary of State. Even the Washington Post came out and said, well, we really didn't get that one right. When we saw the transcript, that's not what he said. But that doesn't make any difference because I'll watch MSNBC and they talk about it like that's what Trump said, and that's not what Trump said. It's not. They lie. They're lying. There's no way that they cannot know that what they're saying is a lie. Now we have this thing that is happening. This is the mayor of the city of New York is upset because they have too many migrants in New York. It's collapsing the city. Listen to what he says, okay? This is the article in today's paper, or yesterday's paper in the New York Times. But listen to what he said about the problem.
We turned this city around in 20 months. And then what happened? Started with a madman down in Texas, decided he wanted to bus people up to New York City. 110,000 migrants. We have to feed, clothe, house, educate the children, wash their laundry sheets, give them everything they need, health care. We're here. We're getting no support on this national crisis, and we're receiving no support. And let me tell you something, New Yorkers. Never in my life have I had a problem that I did not see an ending to. I don't see an ending to this. I don't see an ending to this. This issue will destroy New York City. Destroy New York City. We're getting 10,000 migrants a month. One time we were just getting Venezuela. Now we're getting Ecuador. Now we're getting Russian speaking coming through Mexico. Now we're getting Western Africa. Now we're getting people from all over the globe have made their minds up that they're going to come through the southern part of the border and come into New York City. And everyone is saying it's New York City's problem. Every community in this city is going to be in.
So they have, I don't know, well over 20,000 showing up for the first day of classes. The schools can't handle them. Now, what did this guy say when he was running for office? We're a sanctuary city. Come one, come all. Then they started coming. Now he's saying it's some madman in Texas. By the way, Watt, pay attention to the impeachment trial of Attorney General Ken Paxton down in Texas. It's falling apart. They have no basis for this. This is an operation by people in the Republican Party to keep out certain other elements that they don't like. It's political war. John Eastman, who was one of the attorneys for former President Trump, is on trial right now to lose his law license. He may be one of the, certainly within the top 5 constitutional law scholars in the United States. This guy is brilliant. He is destroying the California bar people who are trying to take his license. One of them, she said, well, the Sixth Circuit said this, and Eastman pointed out, that's not what they said. They said the exact opposite. In fact, what they said supports me. You're lying. And I believe she had to admit that she was. And this is happening over and over again. But they're trying to bankrupt him because he has to have an attorney. All of that costs money. All these people that were named in the Georgia indictment, they're going to spend over $1 million in legal fees. And listen, we love legal fees, okay, around my house, or did. But this is outrageous what they're doing. This is Jonathan Turley, who's no conservative, law professor at Georgetown. He comes out and he says, listen, this is end of the republic stuff that's happening here. This is lawfare. They're getting away with it. And right now, I think the only solution is for the House Republicans to say, no budget until you guys stop, and no money for your departments that are doing this. Now, do they have the constitutional strength to do that? I don't know. I have my doubts. But listen, but go back to this mayor. This is the New York Times. Look at what the quote says in the New York Times. He says, that was a madman down in Texas that caused all these problems. The New York Times comes out and says, but the reality is that the number of migrants offered free passage from Texas over the past year is a fraction of those who regularly make their way from the southern border to cities around the country. Oh. So, Mr. Mayor, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. You're ignorant. Well, I probably shouldn't. You're lying. You're lying. This is a political game. Boston and Massachusetts, it's collapsing the government up there, cost-wise. And we're a sanctuary city. Martha's Vineyard, hey, we're a sanctuary city. We're a sanctuary island. Now, they thought they were pretty safe, right? Who's going to swim across the channel? Well, we'll get you a boat. We'll bring them to you. Well, don't do that. Hey, Obama's probably got some extra bedrooms in his, $25 million home on Martha's Vineyard. This is just insane. You're going to see a lot of this. There's a big dispute. This is from CNBC. About a week ago, food insecurity from Russia's war in Ukraine has triggered instability in vulnerable countries. That comes from the Department of National Intelligence report. Here's the thing that the jurors recommended 39 indictments instead of 18, so 21 additional indictments. That's Atlanta Journal-Constitution. The President's chief of staff tried to get the case moved to federal court, and that motion was denied, and that's being set for trial. They have like somewhere in the neighborhood of 12 million documents in that case. Now, listen, 12 million documents are not relevant to the charges. But I've been involved in these big cases. Let me tell you what the government does. I'll give you an example from a big case that I worked on. We had 39 million documents. They put them in a warehouse, the FBI warehouse down here. And then we said, well, we want what are the important documents. So they said, okay, here's a spreadsheet. We printed off the spreadsheet. It was 2,750 pages long with 25 to 50 documents listed on each page. So multiply 40 times 2,750. That's what we consider to be the important documents. And the FBI, I'm telling you, the FBI does this all the time. And I mean, this is 15 years ago. Then the FBI said, so if you want to, well, we want to see the documents. Okay, well, this document is in this box. So you would go to the warehouse and you would say, I want this box. And there would be one document in it, and they would bring you a box that had 7,500 pages stuffed in it. And all kinds, not in any kind of order, just thrown in the box. So you had to find 2,750 pages of needles in the haystack. And there might only, and that's what they said was the important stuff. And then they're supposed to tell you the stuff that would maybe tend to prove your client's innocence. And the answer to them, they always give then is, well, there isn't anything. And there was, they knew it, and they get away with it. And your thing is a trial. So listen, Jonathan Turley wrote a great article, the Why Not grand jury, the Georgia final report should worry us all. And it should, because they want to come after everybody. Remember I'll call her the giggling grand jury foreman that they had the videos on Twitter, and she's like, well, we'd like to get him to everybody, I'd like to serve a subpoena on Trump. Well, that's the kind of people that were making the decision, apparently. We got this big hurricane coming. This is Hurricane Lee. Don't know if it's going to hit the coast of the United States. It was a Category 5. When I checked this morning, a few hours ago, it was a Category 3. But you're going to get this, that everything is climate change. Everything is climate change. Maui is climate change and everything. And I'm going to go back to this. This is King Charles, a couple years at the 2020 World Economic Forum. And there's a theory that King Charles is the you-know-what. And I don't know. We don't know for sure. People that believe that make a compelling case. I'll admit to that. Now, you always think, like, well, couldn't the devil do better? He's very popular now. Do you understand this? This guy was not popular. He's in his early 70s. He wasn't popular. Now he is. What happened? How did that happen? And so my theory is, listen, if you don't want people to speculate that you're the Antichrist, then stop acting like it. That's a pretty easy way. And so he's out there, he puts out this thing called the Terra Carta. Go look that up. Go read it. Go look at his speeches on that. And what people are, and it's like the climate change Magna Carta. The Magna Carta, one of the great documents of human history that you can go to the British Museum. He says, well, I've got a better one, Terra Carta, for the whole earth. And then he goes to the World Economic Forum, and this is the imagery that they have. Remember the imagery of Yuval Harari and what looks like Jesus in the background? He's talking about humanity and what's human and that type of thing. And then King Charles goes, and it looks like they've got the Sustainable Development Goals crown on him. And there's a big meaning about this. And I mean, just the imagery. I mean, there are some that are even worse. We have this COP28 thing coming up. This is from their own website. And look at what they say. They do the word study. They got Dubai Conference, Planet, Environment. But along the left here, warming, development, warming, ecology, hope, parties, future, nature. And that's because that comes from their own documents that this is one of those the words that are used the most get the bigger font size. So this is what their own documents show that they're trying to do. They have a report card out that came out this week in advance of the International Panel on Climate Change, their synthesis report, and they go through and they say adverse impacts from human-caused climate change will continue to intensify. There's nothing we can do. So what are they doing? Go follow Dave Walsh Energy on Getter. He's also on War Room on occasion. They're destroying the power grids. They want everything to be electric. I still laugh. I saw this car in Colorado a few years ago when I was there speaking at a conference. Guy drives by in a Tesla, and the license plate is I emit zero. And I'm like, come on, man. You plugged it in. Where did the power come from? Did it just magically come? Was it magic power? Like those magic beans that Jack got for his beanstalk? Insanity. And so, but there's a lot of problems. There's food problems, with the war in Ukraine. There's a lot, and they're making a big push to blame Putin for that. I might have a slide on that later on. And then they have the extent to which current and future generations will experience a hotter and different world depends on choices now and in the near term. So you don't have much chance to turn things around. And then you got this Maui thing. So I think they reduced the number of missing to 66 people now, just recently. There's too many questions that they have that are going on there for me. I just think something very strange is going on. There's a guy who does Hawaii real estate YouTube videos. You can follow him. He does a lot of things. I don't always agree with his conclusions, but seems like a decent guy. He's working with the churches. He's raised close to $1 million that he's given to different churches because they were slow walking the paperwork that he set to try to set up a 501c3. So the Hawaii government was slow walking a charitable organization that was trying to help people that had problems in Maui. Why? And another state official resigned. So, and look, this is from the Hawaii. I just pulled it off the Hawaii website. Their executive summary, the future we want for Hawaii. And what do they have? Aloha in the middle of the circle of all the sustainable development goals. Are you sure, John, that those are sustainable development goals? Well, yeah, I actually opened the document and I go into, they want smart, sustainable development. And then how are we doing? Affordable housing needs improvement. Economic prosperity, we're on the upward trend. Disaster management and resilience needs improvement. Boy, they nailed that one. They get an A for giving themselves an F on that. Mobility, upward trend, and there's the sustainable development goals that are related to smart, sustainable communities. Let's see here. This is a decision out of the New York Supreme Court. Now, don't be misled. The New York Supreme Court is the trial court in New York. It's not the highest court. It's actually the lowest of general jurisdiction trial courts. Because I went to a hearing once in the New York Supreme Court, and it was just a regular old trial judge. Fired New York cities who refuse the you-know-what have now been said they are to be reinstated with back pay because they were improperly denied religious exemptions. There was a blanket religious exemption denial that was put in place, and the judge in New York has said, And this is happening in a lot of different places. So let me talk about AI for a few minutes. The rise of generative AI and the coming era of social media manipulation. This is a report by RAND. You can find it and download it. Just type in that title. This is pretty sobering stuff. They're trying to manipulate everything. And I'm not gonna try her name. She's from the Netherlands. This is her on Mark Stein talking about some of the things they want to do with banking. And this is all related to AI and social media and social credit and all this, central bank digital currencies and that type of thing. So listen to this interview, this very articulate individual. And I'm not going to try her name because it's just, it's got too many vowels or too many consonants and not enough vowels. So here we go.
The digital identity is not just a passport that you will have on your iPhone in a digital form. It entails just about everything the government would like to know about you. And yesterday in the Dutch media, we saw a perfect example of what it could entail in the near future. We had the CEO of one of the largest Dutch banks say, why don't we start with a personal carbon credit?
Oh.
A carbon wallet, she called it, actually. Yeah. So right in line with the plans that the World Economic Forum people have for us. And she said it in a way that was particularly funny. She said, well, if everyone gets an individual personal carbon credit, why don't we make it so that rich people who, for example, want to go on holiday a little too often can buy a personal carbon credit from other people who, for example, can't afford buying plane tickets or eating meat too often. So we can that way swap it out.
Oh, so if Bill Gates or Leonardo DiCaprio's carbon footprint is getting a bit too big, then some peasant living in his hovel up country somewhere can sell his, and he can't afford to go to Saint-Tropez, but he'll be able to sell his carbon allowance to Leonardo DiCaprio so Leonardo can park his yacht in Saint-Tropez for a couple of extra days.
Exactly right, that's it. So what will happen is the rich will get richer, the poor will get poorer, and they're saying it openly as if it's not a controversial thing at all. It's neo-feudalism, that's what it is.
Die uitstootrechten verdelen en dat elk huishouden of elke burger een hoeveelheid uitstootrechten krijgt. Zodat we opgeteld niet meer uitstoten dan onze grens. Vervolgens kunnen we, het zit in een carbon wallet, kan je dat noemen.
Kan je het bijkopen.
Ja, en dan kan je, als ik wil vliegen, koop van iemand die niet gaat vliegen, omdat hij daar bijvoorbeeld geen geld voor heeft. Die verkoopt aan mij zijn carbon uitstootrechten en krijgt daardoor een beetje meer geld. Ja. Of diegene woont in een kleiner huurhuis en ik woon in een groot huis. Ik heb dus meer uitstootrechten nodig om mijn huis te verwarmen. En zo kunnen mensen met een smalle portemonnee ook iets verdienen aan.
So, that's what they have planned. Bill Gates, I've read, wants to destroy at least 70, million trees? Because they emit carbon dioxide. Or do they take it, I don't know, they emit carbon. There's something he doesn't like about them. They can grind them up and make meat out of them, I think he's got a company he's invested in to do that. By the way, if Bill Gates called you up and invited you over for dinner, would you go? Knowing what no way. So this AI thing is a really big deal. I mean, these are some great graphics. And what they're doing in AI is they're digging into the basic biological structures of life. And if they can dig into them, and the concern is that pretty soon anybody's going to be able to do it. So you'll be able to get some not so nice groups developing biological weapons. ChatGPT and that type of thing and they're having some financial issues. This is sometimes cover 2045. Remember that, when the year man becomes immortal? And there is a 2045 project. There's also a bunch of 2030 stuff. And this was The End of Humanity, a Time magazine cover a couple weeks ago. So here's a book, This Age of AI, that was written by Henry Kissinger, Eric Schmidt. Eric Schmidt is former CEO of Google. And they've also had a paper come out from DeepMind, which is one of the AI companies, talking about evaluation for extreme risk.
I wanted to understand.
So here's an interview that Eric Schmidt did with Fareed Zakaria about a week or two ago on GPS on CNN. Very interesting.
Again, I wanted to understand what the next few years could bring for AI applications.
Many people believe the computer will be able to recursively self-improve. In other words, it'll start to get better on its own. That's a very, very big change in history. Up until now, the tools that we as humans have built have been under our control. Maybe poorly, but they've been under our control. There is a point. Many people think that it will be within the next 4 to 5 years. Some people think sooner, some people later. I think maybe 5 years, where the system will be able to learn something new and act on it. This is called tool use. There's indeed a paper from DeepMind recently on extreme risks, and it goes through some speculation of what would happen. Imagine if one of these things learns how to get access to weapons. Clearly, we don't want that, right?
So the canonical example that people use when talking about the dangers of AI is you tell the machine to make paper clips, and it says sure, and it makes paper clips and runs out of material to make paper clips with, and then it starts turning other things.
So anyway, so here's more an extreme risk. This is one of the charts in that OpenAI or OpenMind evaluation. Like, they're concerned about where it's going. Now, Schmidt said, well, we'll just pull the plug. We'll put in a kill switch. So here's another part of the interview with Fareed Zakaria where he talks about some of the risk.
What's the solution? Is there, you talked about writing a constitution, essentially a kind of software architecture that puts constraints on AI. What do you think? What do you propose as a solution?
I am concerned about the extreme risk, that is, the extreme or existential risk of these. I'm concerned that they have polymathic capabilities that will allow somebody who does not have a PhD in biology and who's evil to do something that could really harm people. That's my primary concern. There are plenty of other things to complain about. The copyright issue, misinformation, the dog ate the homework kinds of problems. These are real people's problems that they're concerned about. But those are not extreme risks. They won't hurt 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 people. I think primarily the initial threats are in biology and cyber. Eventually, and of course misinformation and so forth, eventually we're going to have a situation where these systems do what is called stepwise refinement. So basically they can say, they can't do this now, they can say, here are the steps to build a recipe, here's the steps to solve a problem, here's the steps to build a bomb. At the point at which it can do steps, each step, it's doing a little bit of thinking. Not our kind of thinking, but its own, to choose the next step. That's the beginning of consciousness. At the point at which those steps are put together, you're going to have superintelligence. There's a scenario, many people believe, where once you have one superintelligence, it can find the others. And in that scenario, it can develop the ability to speak to itself in a language we can't understand. That is uncharted territory in humanity, and we need to prevent that.
Do we have the ability to put into this constitution or software architecture essentially a kill switch? Or is the 2001 Space Odyssey scenario correct, which is that the computer will figure out a way to override the kill switch?
You can always unplug them. So the standard joke is, at the end of the day, this thing's going to be doing whatever it's doing, and there's going to be a guard with a machine gun to protect the computer, and another guard who has only one function, which is to turn it off on command from the president. And that's probably the eventual state. There is good news before everyone gets too worried about this. The kind of damage that I'm talking about will be done by large teams and very large systems. There won't be very many of them. So my own view is that the militaries and national security around the world will be monitoring them. Today, if you launch a missile of any kind, a satellite or what have you, there's a process to...
What's the solution? Is there...
So I'm not sure that I'm really comfortable with the fact that it's just going to be large companies with large systems. And when you're the head of this company called Google, and what you're into and what you've done and what you're doing, that somehow the people in charge of that are going to back off. I'm not real comfortable with that. And I'm not real comfortable that when you co-authored a book One of the guys you co-authored it with was Henry Kissinger, who doesn't look like a guy who should get to the age of 100. It's a modern miracle. And I think, and he and his wife had now been married like over 50 years, I think. And they were like 50 when they got married. Or she was in the late 40s. She's still alive too, by the way. So it doesn't make any sense. So Deputy Secretary of Defense Kathleen Hicks did a big talk on AI and military the other day, unpacking the Replicator Initiative at the Defense News Conference. You can look that up on the U.S. Department of Defense website. This is kind of concerning. A breakthrough. Scientists in Israel grow human embryo models from stem cells. That doesn't seem like... Where's the kill switch? I'm serious. And this is who's announced it. What about other places where they haven't? And nobody's stopping it. Oh, we'll have the military people go in, Eric Schmidt says. Really? No. There seem to be, artificial intelligence seems to give bad actors a lot of avenues to go down. Now, this is a thing, I'm not going to play this. This is Dr. Robert Epstein testifying in front of a House committee in the state of Arizona. This guy is a liberal, classic liberal, would never, ever vote for somebody like Donald Trump. But he testified in front of Congress a couple years ago. And what he said was that the election in 2016 that was close really wasn't that close, was because Google had manipulated the search results. And he's developed some very well respected models. I don't care what Hillary Clinton will tweet, that he's dangerous guy, he doesn't have much data. He needs funding. You can look him up and try to contribute to his organization. But he said one of the states where a governor candidate lost, without Google, she lost by 0.6%. If Google had not been involved, he said there's no question that she would have won by 3 to 5%. And the same thing happened in the presidential election in 2016 and 2020. What do you think is going to happen in 2024? Unless somebody puts an injunction, a kill switch in. I'm just telling you all of this has this really dark end time stuff about it. So you can look it up. They played some of the clips on War Room this week, and you can look it up. This is pretty scary stuff, I think. This has end times concern all over it. Now listen, I know where I'm going. I was just saying to somebody the other day, I'm glad I'm an old guy. I really am glad I'm an old guy, because I don't know if I'd want to be around here for, I don't think I'll make it 30 years, but that would make me 99. And I don't know that we have 30 years left with the way that this stuff is going. So here is
that parents,
the EU, they've just put in a Digital Service Act that really wants to lock down controls on big tech. But do you think the people they were really concerned about were what you want to say on social media? No, they want to control everything. Look at what the head of the EU said. We're bringing our European values into the digital world. Because they know if they control everything in Europe, all the tech companies will go with the European things and apply the European standards everywhere else. So because they're the first ones to come out here, they get it. By the way, you might pray for, there's a couple of people in Canada that participated in some of the trucker protests. Some of these people have been in jail now for 550 some days, awaiting trial, no bail. And they've trumped, for lack of a better term, they've trumped up the charges against them. And this is what this article in The Verge says. The internet just changed forever, but most people living in the United States don't even realize what happened. A draconian new law known as the Digital Services Act went into effect in the European Union on Friday, and it establishes an extremely strict regime of internet censorship that is far more authoritarian than anything we have ever seen before. Listen, this is the Verge this week gets the guest prophecy updater designation. Anything worse than we've ever seen before. Everywhere I'm looking this week, I'm seeing, like, if it's the climate change people or it's this person or that, everything is apocalyptic. And there might not be facts to back it up, but it's just the people think it's apocalyptic, and what are they going to do to support all of this stuff? From this point forward, The Verge says nothing will be the same. It is being reported that the Digital Services Act literally makes large tech companies legally accountable for the content posted to them. So what are they going to do? They're going to shut everything down that they don't agree with. Because the people we agree with would never sue us, but the people we don't agree with, we're getting immunity if we just shut everything down. So you need to pray about some things that I know that are going on in the background, and just pray that the funding and everything comes through, and the tech side and everything comes through, because there are people working on this, but I don't know how long things will stay on certain platforms. I don't know if this thing will be available tonight. I mean, I'm serious. So, and what happens if these platforms don't comply? Their non-compliance is 6% of their worldwide revenue. What if they're operating on a 3% profit margin? So what does that mean? Oh, people lose their jobs. That's no problem. We'll give them a basic income. They're not going to own anything anyway. They'll be happy with that, right? The Economist a month ago, how your new digital law will change the internet. And boy, it sure will. Here's a quote from that article. With the Digital Services Act and its sister legislation, the Digital Markets Act, which will also be phased in over the coming months, the EU aims to change the oversight of large online platforms. Until now, regulators have tried to fix problems such as the spread of disinformation and violations of antitrust rules after the fact. The new laws are meant to help them get ahead of the game by setting clear rules that online platforms must follow. And one of the Proud Boys got 22 years. He was in Baltimore on that particular date, at least 40 miles away. 22 years. Federal system, you have to serve 85% of your sentence. That means he's in jail for what, like 19 years? He's got little kids. I'm telling you, the level of cruelty that I'm seeing with regard to people you don't agree with politically by certain people in this country is shocking. It is absolutely shocking. And I will admit to you, it's frightening. Who's next? So Israel's got this big thing with judicial reform this week. One of the leaders of the opposition says that blood could be shed over this. There's a big hearing this week. Is the judicial reform that was enacted recently by the Knesset, the democratically elected Knesset, I might add, listen, I know people don't like Netanyahu. I get it. I understand that, okay? But stop calling him a dictator because he's persuading the Knesset as organized to vote against you. And there's a huge demographic shift that's taking place in Israel. And what's happening is the minority, there was a lot of them were sort of socialist, left-wing that formed the country, and they're now older, and they're dying off, and the younger generation that's huge is largely more to the right. They don't like that. This is their last gasp. They see the country slipping away from them. And I'll have more about that now. There's this thing with the northern border of Israel. For example, they're trying, this is Al-Akbar, talking about this. I don't have a lot of time. Remember Amos Hochstein? I talked about him recently. He had gone to negotiate the border dispute over the gas fields in the Eastern Mediterranean. And when he did that, he said, we're not interested, we're not doing anything with the land border. Well, now this is from Al-Akbar, and they're saying, this is what they're talking about now. They're having secret meetings about that involving Amos Hochstein. And it involves parts of the Golan Heights. Here's an article from the Tablet. Highly recommend. Go look up this article, Brian, if you can find it and post it in the show notes. Tony Badrin's article in the Tablet magazine. Biden backdoors Israel and the UN, rescinding Trump's recognition of sovereignty over the Golan. Because what they did was they went in and they put in this resolution that they allowed to be enacted or put in place at the UN that called this area up around Tel Dan. Let's see, I see here on the left-hand side, Kiryat Shimona. So if you go up to the right along the red, that's in the area of where Tel Dan is, and there's a Lebanese town called Gajar, and this is Golan Heights area. It was taken back by Israel in the 67 war. If you ever go to Tel Dan, you can see exactly where all that happened. And now the UN put in a thing. Gallant was there, the defense secretary of Israel, defense minister, at the UN, and they allowed this resolution to go through that said occupied Sheba Farms, which is occupied Golan. That completely upends what Trump did when he recognized Israel's right to the Golan a couple of years ago. So there's a lot of things going on. The Palestinians have given a list of everything they want to the Saudis. It includes, proposes that the U.S. finally reopen its consulate in Jerusalem, which was closed by the Trump administration. I don't know that they can do that without the approval of Israel, but they're trying to get this agreement in place. Now, Jake Sullivan says it's not close to being put in place, but we're going to keep working on it. They also want Saudi Arabia to open a consulate in Jerusalem. So everybody's running around doing all these talks. These are articles by Barak Ravid, and he writes at Axios, and somebody called him, Tony Badrin called him the stenographer for the Biden view of the world, or the O'Biden administration. He should call it the O'Biden administration. I'll have to write him an email and tell him that. Trump privately urged, and now they're going to Trump and saying, hey, we want you to support this deal with the Saudis. Why? Because they're afraid he'll get elected and he'll come in and he'll upend it like he did the Iranian thing. And when you look in the background, I can tell you that there is one guy whose fingers are all over this. There's one guy whose fingers are all over the weaponization of the FBI. And he's the O in the Biden administration. He's not gone away. Even Senator Lindsey Graham told Axios that he has urged former President Trump to support the mega deal Biden is negotiating with Saudi Arabia, which would pave the way for a historic peace agreement between the kingdom and Israel. And then look at this is the other thing in this article from September 6th in Axios. Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, the chief architect of the Abraham Accords, also urged the former president to support Biden's potential deal with Saudi Arabia, two sources with knowledge of the issue told Axios. Kushner is very close with Mohammed bin Salman, told Trump that such an agreement would be a vindication of his policy in the Middle East, the sources said. He's got a private equity fund here, and Lindsey Graham praised Jared Kushner's involvement. And this is a good article at Jerusalem Post by Herb Keenan, and it talks about all the things that happened in September. Oslo Accords, Yom Kippur, the Jewish High Holy Days. All of this converging at this time. And does that mean that this agreement's he says at the end of his article, he says, I don't know if this means that it's going to happen, but there certainly seems to be a lot of things converging. The UN meetings. Will this be part of whatever comes out of the UN this month? And then here's another one. This is UNESCO. Now, Israel's not part of that, but look what UNESCO did. Convention concerning the protection of the world cultural and natural heritage. And they had a list of sites, and look at what they had there. State Party, Palestine, Ancient Jericho, Tel El Sultan. There's no Palestine. There is no state that exists called Palestine. And that's a very important site to the Jewish people. They took it back, and there's been a narrative for a long time, and you can go there and find it out. So listen, I'll finish when I'm done. I won't be too long. I'll save some of this. Like I said, I have interviews this week, and I'll try to. I think I have enough material to get by. But I want you to think of this. So we know that there are all these wars of the end times. People argue about whether Psalm 83 is a war, or Isaiah 17 is a war, or whether it's been fulfilled or not. But I think you can make a very credible thing that, yeah, Psalm 83 is a war. It's a permanent condition. Isaiah 17 is something that's going to happen. The fact that something similar happened in the past doesn't mean it's not going to be recapitulated in greater, more specific detail in the future. That's the way Bible prophecy works, especially when we get to the end. The big final fulfillment comes, and it's like, oh, well, that sort of happened before. That's what a lot of people are going to say. And so you just got to be paying attention. But now there's this big push, and Saudi Arabia is making a push like they want to take control of the Temple Mount. And I heard somebody talking today, can't remember who it was. I think it was Winky Madad, former mayor of Shiloh. I think he was in the Knesset at one point, lives in Shiloh. And he said, listen, maybe Mohammed bin Salman, he's the new generation. The old generation wants to support Palestine at any cost. And Mohammed bin Salman does not seem to be there. Maybe he'll come in and say, listen, the mosque is here. This other building is not. Let's split it off and maybe let someplace up there they can build their temple, the Jews. The red heifers are getting close. Some of them, about 3 of them, are still eligible, I think. And that sacrifice would happen sometime between Passover and Pentecost next year. That's a pretty important factor. So now but let's say Mohammed bin Salman does that and says, yeah, we'll let them have control of this part of the Temple Mount. Under our control, what do you think is going to happen in large parts of the Muslim world? Well, when Trump moved the embassy, I've said this before, this is Yeni Safik. This is Erdogan's main mouthpiece. And what do they say? An urgent call to action. That's what that headline up there says regarding Qudus, is Jerusalem. And when that happened, on the website, Erdogan put up that map. Now, I've gone to a lot of Bible prophecy conferences, and everybody's got their Ezekiel 38, 39 maps. I'm telling you this. There's no better map that I've seen at a prophecy conference than what Erdogan had published in December 2017 in response to Trump just moving the embassy of the United States to the city of Jerusalem. And so now the question will be, what will he do if Saudi Arabia is behind this? And I'm just kind of thinking, there's in Daniel 11, it talks about the king of the north, king of the south, and I don't know that this plays into it. This is one of the things I'm processing through my little mind right now. But do you understand how this sets up like a potentially big conflict and war? Because Erdogan's not going to put it. Here's Jared Kushner.
We are joined here today by representatives from the...
If you remember him at at the Manama Dialogue, the Manama Conference back in 2019, at a thing called the Peace to Prosperity Workshop. Kind of interesting choice of terms, don't you think? And look at what it says here. The Saudis were behind Bahrain's curtain. And so what did Jared Kushner come out with about a year later, a few months later? Peace to Prosperity, the vision to improve the lives of the Palestinian and Israeli people, with these maps, one talking about the state of Israel, one talking about a future state of Palestine, and what they were going to do economically. And then here's what Benjamin Netanyahu said about a month ago about this Saudi agreement. Listen to the language that he uses. There's a money quote in here.
Give me a sense of what you would be able to do or to give to normalize a relationship with Saudi Arabia.
Well, Saudi Arabia, I think, is one of the exceptional things that tells you why I'm very optimistic about Israel. Really one of two reasons, one of two main reasons. One is that, well, I'll start with Saudi Arabia, but then I'll get with the other one. I think that we are about to witness a pivot of history. Maybe. I can't guarantee that it'll happen. But first, there is an economic corridor of energy, transport, and communications that naturally goes through our geography, from the Arabian Peninsula, from Asia to the Arabian Peninsula to Europe. We're going to realize that. Yeah. And by the way, my sense is we're going to realize that despite whether we have formal peace or not.
But do you have to give concessions? So we understand Saudi Arabia.
Some, but...
Well, he goes on to say, listen, we're not going to do concessions because that would create an Iranian state in Judea and Samaria. And he's exactly right. But something is going on. And so when the head of Israel says, this is potentially a pivot of history, I would say a pivot of history and prophecy. This is very interesting stuff. And so what happened was, this is a Sunni country, Bahrain, who wants the 67 lines. But what did they allow to have happen? There was a ceremony in Bahrain this week. Herzog and the Israeli foreign minister, Cohen, went to Bahrain, and this is what happened. Do you hear what's playing? The Israel national anthem in a Sunni-run country. And they met. There's a Jewish Israeli flag in Bahrain. Now, that's a Sunni ruler. Bahrain, they're having a lot of riots and demonstrations. It may be because of this, but they're largely Shiite. And so the Iranians don't like this. But this is happening, and this ought to blow your mind that this is happening. And Netanyahu talked about this, and I'll finish with this. The new Europe-India shipping corridor to link Israel and Saudi Arabia, discussed and I think approved this week at the G20 meeting where Biden was. And here's a tweet from Ambassador Michael Herzog that includes a nice little animated map of this corridor for trade. And where does it go right through? And it puts a Saudi-Israeli railway at the center of all of this. So anyway, I have a lot more things to talk about, but that's enough. I appreciate your patience. We're sorry we got a late start this morning. I'll be doing some interviews this week, Serpents and Doves, I think Curtis Reed on Thursday, David Fiorazo, I'm not sure when it'll play. He's got a new show called Worldview Matters, I think, that's premiering tomorrow. And so I don't know if I'll be on Tuesday or Wednesday we're recording it on Tuesday. So pray for David in that, support him if you want in that endeavor as he starts a new platform. And I'll try to put up a midweek or cover some of this stuff in some of my interviews. I have way more. very tempting to do this, but no, I won't. I'll stop. So listen, this is, I titled this Extreme Risk because of the AI, but I could have titled it, This Will Blow Your Mind, because there's so many things happening. They're happening so quickly and they're very significant, and you need to all be paying attention. Trust in the Lord. Don't be afraid. Okay? It's going to be tough, I think, but get together with other believers and persevere, and it all really works out pretty great at the end. That's what we have to remember. So let's pray. Lord, thanks for your day. Thanks for this day, Lord. Thanks for the opportunity that we have to discuss this. Lord, I pray that you will just put a hedge of protection around all of the ministries that talk about these things, that try to be honest about these things, that you would blind the eyes of those who would want to stop it. Figuratively, of course, but just protect people and what they're doing, or give us alternative platforms to help those to come together with funding and that type of thing. Lord, and help us to always remember that our goal is to use these events and things that are happening as opportunities to share the gospel with people in a world where the time may be very short. And give us those opportunities and the ability and knowledge and wisdom of what to say at that time. Bless us this week in Jesus' name. Amen.